Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. We've been on break for a little while, but we're really excited to come back. And for our first episode back, I thought we'd have somebody talking about something I'm exceptionally interested in. So, I'm your host, Jessica Rose, and today we're here with
Keziyah Lewis, and I'm the founder of Juniors in Tech.
Keziyah, I was so excited to chat to you because I talk to so many really talented juniors in tech, and it seems to be really challenging for folks getting into the industry for the first time. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, that's definitely fair, and that's something that I've experienced, and I've talked to a lot of other juniors, whether it's bootcamp grads or people who've graduated from college or people who are just completely self-taught, and it's definitely a struggle, especially when you're trying to find your very first job.
So that's a really interesting distinction. And you seem to be like 3 steps ahead of me in stuff I'd love to talk about. And you broke people into 3 categories, talking about self-taught learners, bootcamp grads, and recent graduates. Do you think that sort of trying to get their first job, that folks have different experiences based on how they've come into the industry?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I can only speak personally about my experience as a bootcamp grad.
I'd love to hear about your experience as a bootcamp grad, if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I'm definitely glad that I went to the boot camp that I went to, and I would advise anyone who's looking into a boot camp to do your research. Make sure you're going to a boot camp that has a good reputation, that's known for putting out graduates who are able to get jobs. I feel like my boot camp prepared me for that. But even so, I feel like there's still a stigma against bootcamp grads and people who are self-taught. I feel like that gets in the way of us trying to find jobs. I look at a lot of job applications, and a lot of them will say a requirement is like a 4-year CS degree.
Yeah. This is something that makes me a little bit bananas because it always seems so weird and so pointless. And a lot of times when you talk to employers, they'll say, "Oh no, apply anyway. We don't mean that about the degree."
Right.
Which just seems like a weird barrier.
Yeah. And it's like, if you don't mean it, like, why is it in the job description? Because I might be looking at that and I might say, well, maybe they're not going to even bring me in or have me for a phone screen. I might as well not apply.
I think for employers, it's easy to forget how much energy, like writing a good, dear listener, you better be customizing your CVs and cover letters for employers. Mm-hmm. But doing that can take 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour.
Absolutely.
Yeah, asking a junior dev who might have to apply for dozens or even hundreds of jobs to jump in for something that might rule them out seems a bit mean.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was applying for jobs, I had this huge job spreadsheet with dozens or hundreds of jobs, and applying for a job is like a full-time job itself. It takes so much time, and you dedicate a lot of time to trying to be a good candidate. And there are just so many barriers to even getting people to apply.
Yeah. So I was exceptionally interested in chatting to you because you actually did something to try and make things a little bit easier and make information shared a little bit more clearly for juniors in tech. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about juniorsintech.com?
Yeah. So Juniors in Tech is a newsletter and job board for juniors in tech. And there's a lot of differences in opinion about what is a junior in tech, how many years of experience are we talking about. I would say my newsletter is aimed at anyone, generally people who have less than 4 or 5 years of experience. Some people achieve senior status when they're only like 2 years into their job. So it depends on what people think. But I'm generally trying to help people like me who are just starting out in tech, who want to advance in their careers, want to find jobs, want to work on different skills, like whether it's technical skills or things like just being better at communicating at their job or learning how to do things like salary negotiation, things like that. Every week in the newsletter, I send out different career resources, articles, advice, tutorials in different things like development, design, data science, machine learning, aimed at entry-level folks. And I also send out a list of entry-level jobs, which are pretty hard to find in this industry.
Well, I was going to say, I'm looking at that portion of your website right now. Mm-hmm. So you offer employers the opportunity to advertise directly to junior technologists.
Yeah. So you can post on our job board and in our newsletter as well.
And I was so impressed because right at the top where you're saying, hey, come post a job, you talk about the number of subscribers to the newsletter and the open rate. Mm-hmm. Like this kind of transparency without having to email or ask is really, really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that would be, something helpful for people to know.
I don't work for you. I'm not getting a kickback. But $150 for employers to reach 900 plus junior technologists. That seems like keeping the price point on that really low was really lovely of you to do.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it accessible. And I think it's a great opportunity to target people who are looking for the type of job that you're posting, especially if you're posting an entry level or a junior job. So yeah, as of today, I think we have pretty close to 1,000. Maybe we're at like 975, 980 subscribers.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
And where are you based?
I live in Central Florida and I'm a digital nomad. So this is like my home base, but I'm not necessarily always here.
Yeah. So I'm so excited about this project primarily because maybe I'm a little old lady and maybe I'm a little biased, but some of the most interesting projects I've seen are folks building things for themselves and for their peers. Mm-hmm. So I think as a junior technologist, for you to come in and say, oh, wow, I'm going to build resources for me and for people like me is so beautiful.
Yeah. I woke up one morning and I was like, why isn't there a newsletter for juniors in tech? Why isn't there this sort of resource just for entry level people? There are other things out there. There are a lot of great resources out there for people just starting out or learning to code, like Code Newbies. Diversify Tech is another great resource for people in tech who aren't necessarily white dudes. There are plenty of other great tech related newsletters and resources out there, but I just find it weird that there wasn't anything specifically for people just starting out, not necessarily who are still learning to code or learning to design, but maybe just got their first job and they just want a resource particularly for them.
So yeah, kind of taking that extra step from there's all these resources teaching people and supporting people on their learning journey, but making that jump into actually getting paid for it is really something that seemed to be lacking.
Yeah, definitely. And once you start your first job, there's still so much to learn. You're still trying to kind of figure out, at least I'm still trying to figure out, like, what do I want to end up as in a few years? Like, what is my career path going to be now that I've actually started working as a developer? Things like that. The learning never really stops when you're in tech. I think everyone agrees with that.
So we're being so positive and so nice, and I want to get a little bit mean. You don't have to join me, but you can if you want to.
Okay.
So I think, not mean to you, I hope. So I think the real need for this, the real need for projects like yours, and the real need for more support in juniors in tech comes from an industry where we're sort of impractically asking for things that don't really meet what juniors need. So we'll say, okay, we want to hire junior developers. So we want people with 3 years of React experience. You say, whoa. What are you doing? Mm-hmm. Stop. Real meaningful entry-level jobs seem to be so rare on the ground. Mm-hmm. What kinds of messages would you like to, or shall I go ahead and rant about, would you like to bring employers who seem to put forward reasonably unreasonable requests for talent? It seems like everyone wants a middleweight dev and nobody wants to take on these new folks and onboard them and teach them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like everyone wants an experienced developer or an experienced designer. And it's like, where do those designers and developers come from? They were once juniors. Everyone started out somewhere. None of us were born knowing how to do a wireframe or how to write a function. We all learned these things. We all got our first jobs somewhere. We developed our skills that way. So I guess that's part of the reason why I wanted to start this newsletter is I want people to realize that just because we're inexperienced or junior or whatever, it doesn't mean that we're completely useless and that we can't do any work at all. We get hired for jobs coming straight out of boot camp or coming straight out of whatever it is, a Udemy course or just being self-taught.
Yeah.
And we're able to produce good work. I just really want to encourage more employers to consider hiring juniors in general and investing in us and mentoring us so that a few years down the road, you won't need to hire a mid-level or senior person because you already have one that you've had for a few years.
Fantastic. And I think that's about as mean as I'm ever going to get. So the message to employers is really, oh, hey, let's be a little bit more realistic. Let's mentor this talent you want to see in the industry and you want to see in your company. Mm-hmm. But for juniors, looking for that first job can be pretty demoralizing, I think.
Yeah, I know it definitely was for me. I would contact employers. And at some point in the interview process, I would be told something like, oh, you're so talented, your portfolio is so great, but you're still too inexperienced or you're still too junior or whatever. I had a conversation on Twitter with a bunch of juniors and former juniors in tech, and I asked them, what have your interview experiences been like? And I took a lot of those responses and wrote a blog post about it.
Oh, wow.
And the post is called, I think it's called How to Not Suck at Interviewing and Hiring Juniors in Tech.
I'm looking at it right now. So if you, dear listener, are like, oh, wow, I really want to follow along, you should head to juniorsinTech.com/blog. And it's just up at the top. It's January 8th. It's right there.
Yeah. I kind of aggregated most of the responses I got because I was just really angry.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the people that I talked to experienced a lot of the similar things that I did. Like, for example, a really common one was being told that we don't have enough experience after the interview process started. You go through, whether it's just a phone screen or maybe you get to the final part of the interview process only to be told, oh, you don't have enough experience. Sorry. Okay, that's fair, but you knew that before we started this whole process.
I'm so sorry. I'm actually looking at this as you speak to me, and I'm mad.
Yeah.
You've got people who have talked to you about this who said, oh, you know what, 3 rounds of interviews, 4 rounds of interviews. And after all that saying, oh, well, we're looking for more experience. It's like,
right.
Why? That's a CV level. That's a resume.
Exactly.
That's not a waste 4 days of someone's time.
Right. Exactly. Like you can easily figure that out immediately.
I am a very mean old lady. And just the idea of folks interview, like 4 rounds of interviews, even for senior roles, that is a lot of interviewing.
Yeah. And that generally takes up a lot of time when you think about spending time to do code tests or any type of take-home tests. That could be like weeks of someone's time trying to get a job and only to be told after a month, oh, you're not experienced enough. Like, it's just ridiculous.
And this seems like a really good time to lovingly fuss at potential employers to say, hey, if you're giving a test or a practice piece of work, you've really got to limit that and just say, wow, we only want to see you working for a couple hours. We only want this to be a small thing. Mm-hmm. If you're paying for someone to do a spec or if you're paying someone to do something that you could potentially actually use, you need to pay them.
Yeah, that's the key word, paying them.
Oh, yeah.
This is definitely work and it takes time. And people are doing this on their own time, on the weekend, or if you were like me, you don't have a job at all, you don't have any income at all, and you're like depending on someone, quote unquote, taking a chance on this junior dev who just graduated from boot camp. And sometimes you're kind of a little bit desperate and you're spending a lot of time doing those things because you really want and really need a job, and then you don't want your time to be wasted. So I definitely advocate for paying for those sort of tests whenever possible.
And I think that you've made a really good point as well, talking about like, do you know what? These are people who need a job, who need to get paid. I think a lot of times we talk about employment and talent in these weird abstractions. We say, oh, we're just looking for a perfect fit. Oh, get back with us in 6 months. I always wonder if people know that that's nonsense. That's not how people's lives work.
Yeah, it's like, okay, my rent has to get paid this month. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. We're talking about jobs and we're talking about money, which is something that people need to survive. It's not necessarily always helpful to always use this very flowery, abstract language, like you said. So yeah, I totally agree.
So for juniors out there who are looking for work, it sounds like maybe your first suggestion might be persevere. This might be a little bit hard, or it might be a lot hard. Mm-hmm. What other kinds of advice would you like to offer someone?
I would say, just looking back on my 7 months of post-bootcamp job searching, the number one thing I want to recommend to people is to network. Please, please network. I don't care if it's you being on Twitter, using the code newbie hashtag if you're a developer to chat with other people in your field. I don't care if it's you going to local meetups in your area. Like, go to meetup.com, look at the tech meetups in your area. There are probably plenty, especially if you live near a big metro area. But it doesn't have to be in person. If you live in a remote place, like networking on Twitter in the tech industry is definitely a great thing to do. But that's how you get a job. Like, that's how I got my job. And it was kind of accidental. I did the whole job spreadsheet thing where I had like over 200 jobs that I applied to, But in the end, the job that I got was from my boss seeing me tweeting on Twitter.
I'm a very disorganized, organized person, and I am a huge fan of making that spreadsheet just so you make sure you are following up and you're not reapplying to the same jobs.
For sure.
I might go even a step further and say if you're networking, if it's not too creepy, I really recommend people build out contact lists. So either use some kind of physical notebook if you like that, or an online contact list. I actually use a personal CRM just to track, you can only keep track of so many people. So all the folks I need to follow up with, or I'm doing social stuff or work stuff with, I'll just add them to that contacts list to make sure I'm checking in.
Yeah, that's a really great idea.
Just because I'm desperately disorganized, I don't think I'd be able to keep up a spreadsheet of 200.
Right.
But your experience sounds anecdotally like something I hear from a lot of folks saying, you know what, I cold applied to all of these different jobs. And in the end, it was a personal contact. It was someone reaching out that made the biggest difference. Do you think that needing these networks and needing these personal contacts is something that continues to hold juniors back? That folks just entering the industry being expected to know how back channels work and build contacts to pass them jobs. Does that feel a bit unfair?
Yeah, I think that definitely holds people back. When you're learning how to code or learning how to do some sort of technical skill, you know how to take tutorials on JavaScript or using Sketch or whatever. But there's this whole other group of learning new skills that aren't technical, but that are like how to network, all of these really kind of social norms that you need to learn, I guess, within the tech industry. And like me, I don't know if it was because I came from a different background or if it may be a class thing or a race thing, I'm not sure. But learning how to navigate these different social spaces in order to try to find a job, something I never really had to do before. So when I was in boot camp, they had like career coaches and career specialists who like gave us workshops on how to do a lot of these types of things. And it was my first time being exposed to all these like really subtle networking type things. So it was just completely new to me. And I think a lot of people just entering the industry might not know that sort of thing.
So that's a really interesting point. If you were talking to someone who was just coming into the industry, just getting started in tech, and they asked you like a really big basic question. So like, how do I network? What is networking? What kinds of sort of general ballpark stuff might you recommend? I meet a lot of juniors who are really, really lovely, but immediately come into meetups or whatever and just say, oh, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm looking for a job. Some of them even have business cards ready. Is that how you'd recommend doing it? Or would you recommend different approaches?
Yeah, what you just described sounds like what I would have done like 2 years ago. I would go to a meetup and I didn't really know, okay, how do I approach talking to people without just being like, oh, hey, I need a job. Please give me a job, that sort of thing. And that's what I was just talking about. Like, how do we navigate these sorts of professional spaces, wanting to get something out of it, but not wanting to be desperate? I know what worked for me was being on social media more. As for what works for people like networking in person, I honestly don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out.
No worries. Were you just like, just don't do it, it's terrible?
Yeah, I guess that's another option. So in the newsletter, I will occasionally send out, I'm not an expert on a lot of different things. One of the reasons why I created the newsletters is to help myself, basically. So I find articles about things like how to do networking, how to do this, how to do that. And I send those types of things out in the newsletter in the hopes that people will learn from, other people who are a lot better at these things than I am. There's definitely resources out there. I would personally say that social media is a great way to do it, especially if you're like me and you're an introvert and you're shy and you don't like going to meetups and things like that.
Are you an introvert?
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely an introvert and I am like really shy. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. You are doing a fantastic job of faking it.
Oh, thanks.
So if we've got a listener right now who's listening to us, who's as excited to hear from you as I am, and they're like, wow, I really want to be a part of this newsletter, where can they sign up?
So it's juniorsinTech.com right there on the homepage. You can just type in your email and you can sign up. You can also view the archives right there on the homepage as well. Every newsletter has a ton of stuff, conference scholarships, speaking opportunities, networking advice, tutorials. So definitely look through the previous archive to see if there's anything in there that's valuable for you.
Fantastic. When you look back at your own experiences or the experiences when you chat to other people, so I imagine you get to chat to a lot of really interesting juniors in tech. What kinds of other resources, besides the incredibly valuable juniorsintech.com newsletter, what other resources out there have you found that are really useful for yourself or that other folks have really loved?
There are so many. One resource, if you're a developer, the Code Newbie weekly chat is something I like doing every Wednesday. So if you're not familiar, Code Newbies is an organization that is basically a supportive community of people learning to code. But it's not just for people who are still learning. You will see people like me who are just starting their careers, or people who have many years of experience in development who are participating in Code Newbie chats. So it's just a really supportive way to, every Wednesday, I think it's not 9 p.m. Eastern, they have a Twitter chat. And it's just a really supportive way to like meet other coders, to chat with other coders around different topics. It's a really great way to meet other people and to network on Twitter. Another good resource is diversifytech.co, which is basically a resource for helping to diversify tech, basically. On the website, they have different things like a list of conference scholarships. They have a job board.
Oh, you had me at conference scholarships.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are tons of those. There's also a way for people to post their profile on the website so that if an employer is looking for a new employee, they can look through that list of profiles and potentially contact someone for a job. So I think that's really great.
So you mentioned conference tickets and conference ticket support and possibly free tickets as sort of a perk, something that juniors in tech might want to go ahead and get involved with. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a lot of value in attending conferences and meetups? And could you talk about what that is?
Yeah, so I think probably the number one value is networking, meeting other people in the industry. It's also great. I mean, whenever I go to a good conference, I always come back inspired. I've learned new things. I want to apply new things to my project. It's also just a really great opportunity to learn new things or to be inspired to work on something new. And they're so expensive. I was complaining about it on Twitter yesterday. I think I tweeted something like, I still can't believe that a lot of conference tickets are the price of a used car. I was looking at tickets for conferences I wanted to go to recently, and they're like $2,000, $3,000. And I'm like, okay, who can afford this? Some employers might pay for those tickets, but then some might have a limit on how many conferences you can go to or the cost of the conference and things like that. So they're not always accessible, even if you work in the industries.
I love how we've come from like lovingly fussing at employers, like do a better job with your job descriptions, hire juniors and support them, to like lovingly fussing at conference organizers to be like, hey, all.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe you've got folks who work for enterprise companies who can pay $3,000 for a ticket.
Right.
But come on, if it's going to be a meaningful conference, you have to have tiers available for students and for learners and job seekers.
Yeah, every week in the newsletter, I also send out scholarship opportunities. And actually, my coworker just got a free ticket to a conference from something she saw in my newsletter last week. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so,
that's very exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I just applied to a couple yesterday that I hope I get. So, yeah, it's definitely a nice opportunity when they have free tickets.
We will absolutely have to have you come back on and like brag if you did get those.
Yeah, for sure.
Nicely brag. So we've touched on a lot of things. A lot of them have been, well, I found personally very valuable, so I appreciate it. Can you tell me about what's next? Where do you want to go with juniorsintech.com?
I've been thinking about that so much lately. I want to do all the things, basically. I mean, I guess the end goal, I want Juniors in Tech to be more than just this little newsletter and job board. I want it to be like more of a community where people who are less experienced can, just support each other and share resources with each other and things like that. Maybe later, I was actually thinking about like starting a YouTube channel or a podcast or like looking into like other.
I hear all the cool kids are starting podcasts.
Yeah, everyone loves podcasts so much, which is weird because I like podcasts, but like I'm more of a YouTube person. So when I was thinking about going into other forms of media, my first thought was like YouTube. And then I asked my readers and they were like, okay, maybe you should consider a podcast because I don't really do YouTube. So it's kind of, I don't know, I'll have to figure that out. But I guess
as a very old lady who doesn't know what kids today are interested in, I am delighted to hear that it's podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I'm been thinking about the future of juniors in tech a lot, but yeah, I'm just trying to, try to grow the community, make it more into a community, and try to help as many people as I can, I guess, while helping myself. I always say to myself, like, I make this newsletter as much as I do for other people as I do for me, because I find the resources really valuable too. And I find myself going back to the archives from like 3 weeks ago and saying, oh, what was the name of that tutorial that I on this thing that I should look at? Or what was the name of that conference that I wanted to go to? And I find myself going back to my own newsletter just to like find things that I missed. So
Yeah, that sounds really fantastic. Keep it valuable, keep it useful, not just you, for other people,
right.
and maybe branch into doing some cool, weird stuff like a podcast, which I can't wait to listen to, or YouTube videos. You're going to have to come back on eventually and tell the whole audience what you're going to do with it. But until then, folks who want to catch up with what you've been doing, or folks who want to get the inside scoop on what's going to happen next, they can find you at juniorsinTech.com. Is there someplace, you mentioned Twitter a bit, is there someplace folks can find you personally on Twitter?
Yeah, Juniors in Tech is on Twitter at Juniors in Tech. We're also on Instagram at Juniors in Tech. And I'm on Twitter at Keziyah L. Keziyah is spelled Kez as in zebra, Iyah, and letter L. I rant about tech and like a bunch of other stuff. That's where they can find me.
For great resources for junior folks and wonderful ranting. Exactly. I think I'll go ahead and find you on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Had a great time.
And thank you very much for listening. Dear listener, if you're back next week, we're going to have a brand new episode, which should be, hopefully, just as exciting as this one. Thank you.